this. If he is looking at accepting Bitcoin on Apple Pay, here's what he said.
It's something that we're looking at. It's not something we have immediate plans to do. I would sort of characterize it as there are things that I wouldn't do, like our cash balance. I wouldn't go invest that in crypto, not because I wouldn't invest my own money in crypto, but because I don't think people buy an Apple stock to get exposure to crypto. And so if they want to do that, they can invest directly in crypto or through other means. And so I wouldn't do that. And I'm not planning to in the immediate future to take crypto for our products as a mean of tender. But there are other things that we're definitely looking at.
Like what?
Like I wouldn't want to have anything to announce today.
Well, let me ask you a different question, because you just said that you might not do it personally. Do you own crypto and any Bitcoin or Ethereum? Would you play around with this?
I do, yeah. I think it's reasonable to own it as a part of a diversified portfolio. And I'm not giving anybody investment advice, by the way.
Happy Bitcoin Tuesday, freaks. It's your boy, Matt Odell, here for another Citadel Dispatch, the interactive live show about Bitcoin, distributed systems, privacy, and open source software. To our audio freaks listening in on the podcast feeds, that clip was Apple CEO Tim Apple giving financial advice to the whole world on TV. Shout out to the ride or dies who support this show. You keep it ad-free, sponsor-free. Just actionable Bitcoin discussion that is supported by our audience. It's really powerful, and I do appreciate all the support I get. And another shout out to the ride or dies that join us in the live chat. Today is a very special episode. I will get into that in a second, but you guys are more important than ever for this episode. If you want to support the show, you can do it through Podcasting 2.0 apps. If you go to newpodcastapps.com, you can pick an app there that supports Podcasting 2.0. Then you search Citadel Dispatch, load it up with sats, and you can stream sats directly to my Lightning wallet. Or you can go to citadeldispatch.com, where I have a tippin.me link, or you can donate via Samurai Paynim. My Paynim is Odell. It's very easy to remember. So with all that said, we got a repeat guest here, Bitcoin Q&A, good friend. And our plan is to try and do an episode, have a conversation here, where it's all encompassing from start to finish, new Bitcoiner coming into the space, trying to do things, the right way, trying to do things the secure way, and just have it all in a single episode, have it all in a single conversation. So as I was saying earlier, the ride or dies that are in the live chat, if you have questions, put your questions in. If you're not a beginner and you're listening in and you think we missed something, feel free to put that in the live chat as well. And just a reminder, the live chat is accessible through the Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube streams, and they all get fed into the main chat. So with all that said, I'd like to introduce Bitcoin Q&A. How's it going, Bitcoin Q&A?
Hey, Matt. It's going good. Thank you for having me back on. It's been a while. I think episode number 2, wasn't I, with Ergo? So, yeah, looking forward to getting back to it and running through some of the beginner-focused stuff that seems to be missing from some of the podcasts floating around. We tend to jump into the weeds pretty quickly sometimes, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling we are going to also be jumping into the weeds, but we're going to try and do it in a nice, constructive path into the weeds.
Yeah, I need you to keep me in check on that one.
But yeah, you are a dispatch OG. It's been a minute, and we've both been through a lot. I like to think that we've been through it together, and yeah, just love that you're back joining us. And I hope it's not just the second time; it'll be many more times in the future. So with all that said, freaks, we have a bit of a structure that we set up for this episode, which is unusual for Dispatch, but I think it'll keep us more focused. And so we're going to start with actually getting Bitcoin for the first time. So do you want to start with that Bitcoin Q&A?
Yeah, so it's buying Bitcoin's never been easier than it is today. There's exchanges popping up all over the place. Every man and his dog seems to be giving you the opportunity to be able to buy Bitcoin from within their ecosystem or their app. The kind of elephant in the room, unfortunately, is the Know Your Customer, or KYC, as it's lovingly called within the space. KYC is a regulation that essentially any sort of business entity that has a banking relationship has to abide by, that kind of dictates that they must collect certain pieces of information from anybody that they give a service to. Obviously, in the context of Bitcoin, that's an exchange that sells you Bitcoin for dollars, pounds, yen, whatever your jurisdiction is.
So in practice, that looks like if you go on to Cash App and you try and sign up to Cash App to buy Bitcoin, they require you to upload your ID, your address. I'm not sure. Some services require like a selfie. That's what we're talking about right here, which is this identification information that's required when you sign up to one of these regulated services.
Right, and some of these exchanges now are even doing videos where they take like a 3D scan of your face, which is kind of scary, really.
Just a little bit.
So, with all that said, why is that kind of why is that sort of a bad thing that people like Matt and myself sort of try and warn people away from, or at least paint the dangers clearly for everybody. So when you supply this information to be able to buy Bitcoin in a really sort of easy and stress-free way, Cash App's a good example where you can just in a couple of clicks get some Bitcoin into a wallet that you control. But one of the main problems is that all of this information gets rounded up into a centralized database that's controlled by the entity that you're doing business with. Unfortunately, these entities, or some of these entities, I won't tar everybody with the same brush, don't have a great track record of securing it effectively. Talk about perfect timing. We heard about a hack with Robinhood yesterday, was it?
Where there's 7 million users.
7 million users. Information has been leaked. Now, there's varying degrees of the severity of the leak. Some of it's just email addresses. Some of it's more personal information like banking details, etc. To name a few others: Equifax, Facebook, T-Mobile, Clubhouse, LinkedIn, Coinbase, Ledger. All of those companies require some form of your personal information to do business with them. And they've all had hacks where, again, with varying degrees of severity, that somebody that shouldn't have got their hands on your information did so. And we're not talking small fry here. Some of these hacks were to the tune of millions and millions of people. Now, if that's something like Facebook and your email address gets leaked, it's not really the end of the world. It might piss you off a little bit. When you tie that into something like Bitcoin, where hopefully, especially after you've listened to this podcast, you're sort of securing your own wealth. That might be in your house, that might be in a loved one's house, or a combination of those. If the wrong person was to get hold of this information, your selfie, your home address, in the case of Coinbase, how much Bitcoin you've actually bought, that is essentially painting a very large cross on your front door that might make it inviting to the wrong type of people to come and pay you a visit to see if they can relieve you of those sats. So that's one of the main reasons that I personally try and sort of make people aware that, yes, going on to Cash App or Coinbase or whatever is they make it really, really simple. They've got really nice polished UIs to be able to go and get your hands on some sats within a couple of clicks. It's one of the big risks is that this information is leaked on a regular basis, and there are companies in the space that, to their credit, have they've never been fallen prey to one of these attacks. But unfortunately, they do seem to be becoming more and more frequent. So yeah, that's one of the main risks with KYC. So
yeah, I mean, I would add a couple of things here. First of all, even if a company hasn't been compromised yet, we should basically operate under the assumption that they will be compromised in the future. This information, once it is taken, is often sold to other people as well. It can be combined with other information that was leaked from other databases. So, for instance, if you have the Facebook leak, and the Facebook leak has your mailing address in it, and then you have the Ledger leak, and your Ledger leak has your email address in it, but the Facebook leak also had your email address in it, they can combine those two leaks to get your full email address and your actual in-person address. Second of all, we've seen physical attacks happen to people who were known Bitcoiners and how much Bitcoin they had. Sometimes it was because of these leaks. It's hard to tell for sure. Sometimes it's because people just talk about their Bitcoin and how much Bitcoin they own, which you also shouldn't do. Third of all, this information can obviously be used against you by your own government. It can also be used against you by foreign governments in the future. Obviously, it is painting a target as you are someone who owns Bitcoin and uses Bitcoin and exactly how much Bitcoin you have. And then fourth of all, in the Coinbase leak specifically, all of your withdrawal history was also leaked. So it can be used to track your future Bitcoin transactions based on that information. And we will go further in on Bitcoin privacy and trade-offs with Bitcoin when using Bitcoin, trying to use it privately, how to go about that later on in this episode. But these are just things to keep in mind.
Right. So, all of which is sort of incredibly scary. And the other final thing I'll add to that before we sort of look onto the alternatives is that, something that I like to sort of keep in mind and remind people is, being here for number go up is great. I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't like to see us hit all-time highs all the time. But Bitcoin is also created to be able to make the transactions that they don't want you to make. Now, if you're sort of tying all of your Bitcoin to your personal identity, you're kind of putting a chink in your armor before you've even started. That if you do want to make those purchases that Bitcoin allows you to make due to its pseudonymity, then you're sort of starting 2 steps back by tying your Bitcoin holdings to your personal identity, which is where sort of buying from a no-KYC source comes in, so that you can have some, or hopefully, in a perfect situation, all of the Bitcoin that you own.
So before we get there, just one more thing. KYC, these records are forever. Once you do these records, you have to assume they're forever. Is it best practice to delete an account? If you're no longer using it, yes, but you should assume that actual database record hasn't been deleted. And it might be used against you in the future. So these are things to keep in mind. Now let's move to, okay, so if you're trying to avoid KYC, you don't want to use one of these regulated services, what are your options?
Right, so the sort of 2 most common ones that kind of get bandied around in terms of actually purchasing Bitcoin is BISC, which is a peer-to-peer decentralized exchange, where you essentially, it's a maker-taker model where somebody will want to sell some Bitcoin, and they will go onto BISC and they'll say, I want to sell X amount of Bitcoin for this much, $500, whatever. And then you as a buyer can go on to that sort of peer-to-peer marketplace and look for these offers to see one that sort of fits your bill, that is within your price range and the amount that you want to buy. You can go on completely anonymously and sort of take their sell offer so that you can buy that amount of Bitcoin from them.
That's spelled BISQ. BISC.
Yeah. So it's an application that you just download onto your computer. Basically, you run it all locally. There's no personal information. You don't need to show any IDs to sign up. The only person, again, depending on the payment method that you use, there's many payment methods. Some are better from a privacy perspective than others. But let's say, most people are going to go on, and if they want to sort of be able to take a wider range of offers from more people across the world, they're going to want to use the banking system, which might ring some alarm bells to some of the people listening. But what also I say is, what's worse is sharing your banking information with one person who is very likely to be a privacy preserving individual, because they probably wouldn't be using BISC otherwise, versus the regulated entities that throw all of your information into a centralized honeypot that we've just explained. So that's one way. Some of the more private options that are available on BISC are sort of postal money orders, which are, I don't really know a great deal about because it's a US centric thing. But you've also got cash in the mail, and then there's various other options that are kind of relevant to their sort of jurisdictions. Another option as well is HODL HODL, which works quite similarly to the way I've just described with BISC. The difference being is that HODL HODL is kind of a centralized company that hosts the sort of buy and sell locations for you. It's a website, hodlhodl.com, where you can go and sort of make offers, or you can take offers, again in the same fashion. So there may be some other alarm bells ringing, well, what happens if I go onto BISC or to HODL HODL and I take this buy offer and I send somebody some US dollars? What's to stop them from just never sending me the Bitcoin? So both of these services work on what's called an escrow system, where the seller will have to deposit the Bitcoin first into a multisig wallet that is controlled by the buyer, the seller, and the sort of centralized entity, so that basically they can't sort of run off once they've got hold of your dollars, because they have to deposit the Bitcoin first, and you'll be notified to wait until you send any of the payments, so that they've proved that they've sort of deposited the Bitcoin into that.
There is still some risk there, but it's reduced risk.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, I would say it's more of a grief and a tat than you're not really at risk of losing funds. It's more of a going through the arbitration process to prove that you've sent the dollars so that you get the Bitcoin back in the end. So it's going to be more of a headache more than a risk to actually lose any cash, would you say?
Yeah, more or less. Continue.
So some of the other options, if you can buy from Bitcoin ATMs. There's a really great website called coinatmradar.com, where you can go on, punch in your physical location. I would recommend doing so using a VPN, and it will tell you all of the Bitcoin ATMs that are in your local area. The general premise of these is that you walk up, you can deposit some cash, give it a Bitcoin address, hopefully from a wallet that you control, which we're going to come on to later. And the Bitcoin will be deposited directly into that wallet that you control. There are, again, as is always the case with Bitcoin, some caveats. Just because you're depositing cash doesn't immediately make Bitcoin ATMs super private. Depending on the brand of ATM machine that you use, some of them do still ask for ID, but that is distinguished on the website I've just said, which is coinatmradar.com.
Right. Some ask for ID, and then some ask for just a phone number. Some ask for both.
Yeah, which and obviously the ones that just ask for the phone number are the better ones, because you can spoof that with services like textverified.com, where you can just get kind of a burner number to satisfy the ATM's phone number requirements, but obviously that's not tied to your personal identity. And then
before we continue, since we're still like early in the episode, and I should have mentioned in the beginning, Bitcoin Q&A has my favorite guides in the space. So if you want to look up something specifically, or if you prefer reading, if you go to bitcoiner.guide, he has all of his guides listed there. So just keep that in mind. Okay, continue.
Yeah, pretty much everything that we're talking about, I've got some form of information on it. So yeah, moving on to other no-KYC opportunities. So we've covered peer-to-peer exchanges, we've covered ATMs. The next sort of option is to earn it, which might sound a bit outlandish to some people that are new and entering the space. But all I will say is that everybody has some form of a unique skill, and there's always going to be somebody who needs what you can offer them. It's just about sort of trying to build up a bit of a reputation, whether that's in your local area or online, so that you can, sell your time or your skills and knowledge, and receive sats in repayment for them. And the other option, again, probably not as much of a beginner option as I would like it to be, but the other option is to mine it. Although home mining does seem to be going through somewhat of a renaissance, which is really, really great to see. So the general premise of that is that you can buy a Bitcoin miner, you can plug that into your outlet at home, plug in an Ethernet port, connect up to a mining pool, and stream yourself some secret sats or some private no-KYC sats directly, again, into your wallet that you control. There's been, a fair bit of FUD banded around that home mining is kind of too difficult or it's too expensive. The thing I would say is that, yeah, it's very much dependent on your electricity prices. But again, this show's fairly US centric, and there's a lot of places in the US where, and if you're earning anywhere less than, I think, Neil's in the chat there, he'll probably correct me on this, but I think you're profitable mining at the moment anywhere below 30 sats.
Yeah. So, I mean,
cents.
with all of these techniques, you might be spending a little bit more money than you would be if you went through one of these regulated services. The way I justify it is, I mean, you're paying a little bit of a premium for privacy, and you're paying that for privacy going forward too. So it keeps paying dividends. With mining specifically, home mining is a fantastic way, in my opinion, of accumulating KYC free sats. It's really nice because once you have it plugged in, it's just constantly going. You don't even have to really think about it. It's just constantly bringing in more sats. We already have 2 home mining Citadel dispatches. So if you go to citadeldispatch.com, or if you go through the podcast feed, or if you go to bitcointv.com and our playlist over there, you can find those episodes. And we're about to have a 3rd one too. I think November 30th, there's going to be a 3rd home mining episode. So if that's something that interests you, you should go check those out, starting with the first one, because we literally spent like 3 hours on all the different trade-offs there.
Yeah, just to come back on something that you said about, generally speaking, you're absolutely right that you're going to pay a little bit more for no-KYC sats, especially if you go to the peer-to-peer exchanges. But I like to try and reframe it, and it's not a no-KYC premium. The price that you see on a KYC exchange, I like to call it the discount that you get given for giving up your personal information and putting yourself a little bit more at risk than versus getting some sats that are not tied to your identity. So I think that's a useful framing. Yeah.
The real price is the private way, and then
exactly
you get a discount if you sacrifice your privacy. And then one method that you didn't mention, which is probably the most accessible to new coiners, is if you have a friend or a couple friends that are interested in Bitcoin and they've been in Bitcoin for a while. Obviously, if you can pay them cash for some of their Bitcoin, that is the most private. I wouldn't say the most private, but it's definitely the most accessible private way for a new coiner. And if they don't want to sell you any, they might know someone who wants to sell some. So that's always something to keep in mind. Cash in person is gives you very good privacy guarantees, period. What else? Also, like, if to the Bitcoiners out there listening to this show, guide your new coiner friends in through that kind of method, right? And whether or not you want to actually explicitly sell it to them, that's one thing. But if you go out to dinner, have them pay for dinner with their cash or their credit card, and then pay them back in Bitcoin, or give them birthday gifts in Bitcoin, and like get them started in a peer-to-peer fashion rather than just throwing them to the wolves and sending them to a regulated exchange?
Yeah, there's a couple of people in the chat that have just rightfully shouted out UTXO vouchers as well, which is essentially you'll get sort of stores that sort of sign up to become an UTXO sort of vendor, and you can go in, hand over some cash, and you'll get sort of a voucher where you can go and claim the equivalent amount of sats from that, again, directly into a wallet that you control. The other caveat, the only caveat with UTXO is that the sort of KYC responsibility, if any, is put onto the specific vendor. So it won't just be, don't just presume that because there's an UTXO vendor near you that it won't be no KYC. Each one is sort of left to kind of come up with their own interpretation of whether they need to do it or not, basically.
And you have that major chain in the UK that's an UTXO vendor, right? What's the name of that?
It was Poundland, but it stopped a couple of months ago, and it's showing no signs of coming back, unfortunately.
Okay. So they realized what was going on, and they're like, we can't, too much liability.
Which was a shame, because they have a store in literally every town. There was hundreds of them, and it was massive for the UK. But yeah, unfortunately, it's no more. Okay,
well, that's a shame. If you want to read more about the dangers of KYC, you can go to Bitcoin Q&A's website, NoKYConly.com. However you decide to proceed with obtaining Bitcoin and accumulating Bitcoin, the next step is trying to secure it well, and secure it in a way that you don't have to trust a third party who can seize your funds. So how should new coiners go about that? Bitcoin Q&A. What are their options?
Yeah, so the natural first step for most people, unfortunately, like we just said, is a centralized exchange, again, like Coinbase, Cash App, or something like that, where you will go on, deposit dollars or your local currency. They will credit your account with the equivalent amount of sats. What you have there is an IOU where you've got an account with them, and where they say that you've got this much Bitcoin. Essentially, what you actually have in real terms is, it's an IOU, and you don't actually hold any Bitcoin. The sort of very essence of Bitcoin is that there goes a saying, "Not your keys, not your coins," which is bandied around a hell of a lot, and for good reason. And it essentially means that if you're not holding the keys for your Bitcoin, you don't actually have any Bitcoin. So you've bought some on an exchange. The next step would be to get yourself a mobile wallet where you can generate the keys within that wallet, so that you and only you are in control of any of the Bitcoin that you send to that wallet.
So before we move on, and I'm sorry that I keep cutting you off. I hope it's fine with you.
Of course.
Before we move on, so the risk is if you're holding it in one of these custodial wallets, which is what the exchanges default to, and there's some other services that also are custodial wallets. Basically, the telltale sign of that is the way you access it is through a username and password. You don't have any backup yourself. What happens there is there's a high likelihood that your account could get frozen. We've seen that with PayPal in the past, with fiat, with just US dollars, where PayPal will freeze your account and you're not able to get your money. It could be stolen if the exchange gets compromised or the custodial wallet gets compromised. And obviously, you're trusting your privacy completely with the custodian because they know all of your transactions and your current balances. So it's not ideal. And you want to learn how to hold Bitcoin yourself, because one of the revolutionary things about Bitcoin is that you can hold it yourself in a way that someone has to physically compromise you to take your Bitcoin. So I guess you were about to start with mobile wallets. I think mobile wallets are the most accessible way, getting a wallet on your phone, basically, to hold your Bitcoin for you, right?
Yeah, just before I get down to the mobile wallet, it comes back to the point I made earlier about censorship resistant, or being able to make the payments that you want to make, not that they give you permission to make. If you've got to ask for permission from an exchange to be able to send Bitcoin to your desired destination, you're asking for permission, and that's not why we're here. We want to be able to spend our money to whoever we want, whenever we want. So first step and the easiest step is to get a phone wallet. They're free, they're easy to access. You can download from any popular app store, or quite a lot of them offer direct downloads so that you can download from the chosen team's website or GitHub. A lot of people tend to rush in and try and buy the next best hardware wallet straight away when they've just bought sort of $100 of Bitcoin to dip their toes in a little bit. Well, if you're just dipping your toes in to see if this thing's working for you, then it doesn't make any sense to go out and buy a hardware wallet. And this is coming from somebody who works for a hardware wallet company. It doesn't make any sense to rush out and buy a couple $100 on a hardware wallet when you own less than that in Bitcoin. So that's why
you already have a perfectly good phone that you carry around with you. It's very easy to spend and receive from. But the important thing here is that you use a reputable mobile wallet. There's a lot of scammy mobile wallets. Don't just open up the App Store and search for Bitcoin wallet. You will get a lot of bad options there.
Yeah, unfortunately the top 10 results for that sort of search in most of the app stores are quite abysmal. My personal recommendations would be Samurai Wallet if you're an Android user, or Blue Wallet, or if you're an iOS user. Moon Wallet is also another one that I know you're pretty bullish on that as well.
Yeah, both Blue Wallet and Moon Wallet, that's with 2 U's, MUUN, are available on both Android and iOS. They're very easy to use for beginners. I would say they're not very intimidating. So don't be intimidated. You should download one, just try it.
So the kind of general premise of these, and unfortunately I mentioned Moon Wallet there, it's gonna buck the trend of what I'm about to say, but the general premise is you'll download the app from your chosen location. The app, when you set up a new wallet, the app will show you a list of 12 or 24 words, which is your master secret, which is the master backup to your Bitcoin wallet. Anybody that gets their hands on that, be that physically or digitally, is going to be able to take all of your funds. So make sure that you write that down and secure it somewhere safe. And then you're free to...
So Moon Wallet has a different backup method. It'll prompt you and explain how to back up that. But we will focus on this standard, which is something we call seed words, which is they're basically these words. It's a phrase, and the wallet generates it for you, and you need to keep them secret. You absolutely need to keep them secret. So you don't want to put them on an internet connected device. You put them on you don't want to save them in your iCloud notes folder. You don't want to take a screenshot and upload it to iCloud. What you want to do is, at the bare minimum, you want to write it down on a piece of paper, double check that you wrote it down correctly, store it somewhere securely, because if someone gets access to it, they have access to your funds. But as long as you have those words, your phone, you could drop your phone in the toilet, it could fall, it could fall and crack and break, or just completely some phones just stop working sometimes. As long as you have those seed words, you can reinstall the app on a new device and just put in those words, put in that phrase words, and you will have access to your funds.
Yeah, and the beauty of that is, like you said, most of the 99% of the wallets in the space all sort of work to that same standard. So you wouldn't necessarily have to even download the exact same mobile wallet, as long as the mobile wallet that you choose it abides by the rules, which again most of them do. Then you can sort of put that seed phrase into any other wallet. There's a quick question in the chat which I think is probably good to touch on before we move on to hardware wallets. And somebody asked, how much would you need to own to get a hardware wallet? Now, obviously, I'm not going to be able to answer that for everybody that's watching. It's quite an individual question. All I would say is, if it's the only mobile wallet you've got and it's on your daily phone, I would use the equivalent of how much physical cash would you carry around with you, and what's your limit at which it's going to start affecting your life if you was to lose that balance. The quick caveat
the
mobile
wallet should be almost considered is like your spending wallet, what you would have in your back pocket. But going further, when we go into more methods of storing your Bitcoin, that would be more like a savings account. Except you were about to say a caveat. I mean, I have my own caveat. I would say, I think, especially if you're using a reputable one, I think people can feel a little bit more comfortable than the kind of amount of cash that they would carry in their pocket. I know, like, I wouldn't feel more comfortable. I wouldn't feel that comfortable carrying more than like $400 in my pocket. But like a mobile wallet, especially if it's your first wallet, you're just getting started, you're getting comfortable, you have your seed words backed up, your phone's up to date. You know, we don't see hacks are theoretically possible. Obviously, phones get compromised all the time. But I would probably, if I had to pick a number, I'd like be in like the $5,000 to $10,000 range. Like that's where you start having to really consider securing it more. And you should also operate under the assumption, because Bitcoin tends to go up fast. You should be prepared ahead of time, because it could be, you know, it could be $1,000 in there, and then in 6 months it could be worth $8,000.
Yeah, the other thing I would say as well is that there's almost everybody has got a spare phone lying around at their house that, you know, you could use that as your sort of dedicated Bitcoin phone, where you could be slightly more comfortable storing, you know, maybe larger amounts relative to the individual. And then you could kind of decant off into your sort of daily phone what you might want to spend on a day-to-day basis. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that approach as well, if you didn't want to shell out quickly for a hardware wallet, which we can come on to now. So a hardware wallet is...
Well, before we get to hardware wallets, you also have, there's also software wallets on the computer that you can have, right? So you have mobile wallets, you have software wallets on your computer, which like you install an app on your computer. I would say, like, unless you're an advanced user and you have like a dedicated computer, and this episode isn't for advanced users, they should probably shy away from that in the beginning. I think the mobile security model is a stronger security model, as you know, as long as you're not worried about like the NSA or something, or like the Chinese intelligence services or the Israeli intelligence services.
Most of the population are not great at securing their computer. Most people's computers are, unless you're sort of a bit of a hacker man, there's you know, a far more vulnerable device than your mobile phone is, which is why, like you said, you know, I completely agree that I don't recommend them, especially for larger amounts. And I tend to sort of skip straight to the hardware wallet after the mobile wallet stage. So hardware wallets are essentially a dedicated physical device designed to manage the keys that control your Bitcoin. So with them being a physical dedicated device, you know, their one purpose is to secure your Bitcoin, whereas your phone has, you know, it's essentially a computer in your pocket, with all of that extra functionality that your phone has compared to a hardware wallet, increases the theoretical attack vectors where hackers or the NSA, whoever, can sort of try and attempt to get their hands on your Bitcoin. So these devices are very focused. They're focused at securing your Bitcoin from physical attack, and also from digital attack, i.e., you know, somebody stealing your keys over the internet if you were to connect one of these devices to your very likely highly insecure computer. So a lot of them, most of the good ones, work, you know, their primary way of sort of keeping things secure is that they operate with what's known as an air gap, where they can operate without being connected physically to any other device, because it's that physical connection that sometimes can introduce extra threat vectors.
So the idea, just to distill it here, like the idea of a hardware wallet is that you have a device that's built to securely hold your Bitcoin. Well, technically it's holding the keys to your Bitcoin. But for all intents and purposes, it's you can think of it as holding your Bitcoin, and it interacts with either your computer or your phone in a way that those keys the keys are what protect your Bitcoin, gives you access to Bitcoin, and you don't want someone else to have access to those keys. It keeps those keys off that computer or off that phone. So it stays on the device, and that device is never connected to the internet. So the basic concept behind securing your stash with a hardware wallet is that for someone to compromise you, they need to physically have access to you and the device, or if they can compromise the device, just the device, but they like have to come into your home or come into your office and get that device rather than hacking you through the internet.
Right. And you know, even if a sort of generic attacker was to gain physical access to most of these devices, they're still going to need a fair bit of time and a hell of a lot of equipment to be able to, you know, crack the protections on the device to be able to access the keys and to be able to steal your Bitcoin. So it's not just a case of protecting you from a malware infested computer. If somebody was to break in, there's still PIN protection on the device. So it's not just a case of you lose the device and you lose access to your Bitcoin. Again, the premise that Matt spoke about before about writing down your seed words is exactly the same with a hardware wallet. The difference is here is that when you sort of generate those 24 or 12 words, it's done in an offline environment that's never been connected to the internet. So that again, it just removes that extra threat vector where you're not connected to any sort of internet connected devices. So it's just that extra layer or wrapper of security.
Perfect. What is your favorite hardware wallet?
I saw that one coming a mile off. So full disclosure, I work for a hardware wallet manufacturer called Foundation Devices. And obvious biases aside, I genuinely believe that we make the best option for a beginner entering the space. It's incredibly secure, but also very easy to operate. So I should have named the device. It's called Passport. And another great device is the Cold Card, which is probably looks a little bit scarier to the newcomer, I would say, but has some extra features that might be more beneficial for more advanced users that they could sort of leverage. So those would be my two favorites.
Yeah, I would say my favorite is Cold Card. I've used multiple versions of Cold Cards. I highly recommend them. And then if we're not really going to go into shitcoins here, but if you absolutely need to gamble on other coins in the space rather than just Bitcoin, both Foundation and Cold Card are Bitcoin only. I mean, so I would say either use a Ledger or a Trezor hardware wallet if you want shitcoin support. But even in that situation, you probably should go with a Bitcoin only hardware wallet for your Bitcoin and then use the other ones for your shitcoins. And just like the mobile wallets, there are lots of really bad hardware wallets out there. So don't just Google best hardware wallet, because a lot of influencers are paid to promote them. So you'll see YouTube videos with 500,000 views saying to use a horrible hardware wallet. So consider that.
Yeah, what I would say, just to back that up again, is that, you know, likelihood is if you're listening to this, that you're at least aware of, you know, Bitcoin Twitter and the people that are around and popular on there. Most of those people have been around for a good number of years, and they've probably tried all of these devices. So look to what most of those people are using, or at least recommending, when you're sort of doing your own research to see which device is going to be best for you.
Perfect. When they're using their hardware wallet, they need to use it with software. They need to use it with an app. So what are your recommendations for which apps they should use with their hardware wallet?
The best two for me, if you want to stay on desktop, which generally gives you sort of a little bit more extra functionality, would be number one, be Sparrow Wallet, hands down my favorite. or if you like a little bit of a sort of easier to operate interface with kind of less advanced features, Spectre Desktop is also a great one.
Two great recommendations. Spectre used to be my favorite. Now Sparrow's my favorite.
Yeah, which might be a good segue for what we've got coming up next.
Well, before we get there, you can also use both the Cold Card and the Foundation Passport with Blue Wallet on mobile. So if you are going through the steps and you got comfortable with Blue Wallet already, because you started with the mobile wallet, you can then use Blue Wallet with both of those hardware wallets, which is nice. Especially, I mean, I think some people listening to this probably don't have a computer that's... So a lot of people don't have computers. They just have the computer in their pocket.
Yeah, we're heading towards a mobile first world, aren't we? If we're not already there, and Blue Wallet does offer a great interface, especially with the passport, with the QR interfaces. Very, very slick and very easy to wrap your head around as a beginner.
Awesome. Okay, so you want to go to the next topic? You said there's
Let's hit nodes. Yeah, so I talked about Spectre Desktop. And one of the great features about Spectre Desktop is it actually has a built-in Bitcoin node. So the next step along your journey, hopefully, will be to look to run your own Bitcoin node. A Bitcoin node is, you can look at it as your sort of interface into the Bitcoin world. It's going to be that next step along the sovereignty journey, so that you can, again, one of the buzz phrases that you hear in the space is verify your own transactions. So when you receive any Bitcoin transaction, that will be being passed to you via a whole network of nodes, and the wallet that you choose to use will be connected to a node. Now, that node could be a centralized node operated by an exchange. It could be a node that you don't know who exists, that might actually be a chain surveillance company, or hopefully it could be your own node that you can run in your house relatively cheaply. Now, the benefits of running your own node, like I said, is you can verify your own transactions, so that you can be sure when somebody's sending you a transaction that the transaction abides by this sort of rule set, that the network that you've chosen to join, that we all agree on. To put that a little bit simpler, is that you can be sure that sort of nobody's trying to cheat you and send you some fake Bitcoin or a transaction that's not valid. So that, you might be selling goods or services and they might be paying you in Bitcoin for that. And if you weren't verifying your own transactions, they might be able to send you.
The way I like to frame it is, it's using your own node. To interact with the Bitcoin network, you have to use a node. And if you don't use your own node, you don't have counterfeit detection, is like kind of how I like to view it. Someone can kind of trick you into thinking you have Bitcoin when you don't have Bitcoin. So you want to use your own node for that purpose. And then second of all, which I think is almost more tangible to people, because to be honest, we haven't seen, that's more of a theoretical attack, and we haven't really seen it play out. It could still play out in the future. You should assume it will. So you want to use your own node for counterfeit detection. But second of all, it also, if you don't use your own node, you're trusting your privacy with whoever's node you're using. So you want to use your own node so that you don't have to trust potentially a stranger or a company with that private transaction information and balance information.
Yeah, it's about removing trust, essentially. And by running your own node, you're putting the trust in the hardware and or the software that you are choosing to run, not the one that's kind of being given to you if you're operating with an exchange or a centralized node runner. So there's a massive awash of choice with varying degrees of technical ability. The easiest way to get running with your own node is to download a piece of software called Bitcoin Core. This is kind of the sort of de facto software built by the Bitcoin Core developers. That is essentially a piece of software that you can, in a couple of clicks, download onto your laptop or desktop, and it will start to download your own copy of the blockchain, so that you can transact with the built-in wallet to get started and verify your own transaction that way. That's absolutely the easiest way. And as I touched on earlier, Spectre Desktop actually has essentially that built in as well, just packaged in a slightly different way for you. So they're absolutely free. And within a couple of clicks, you'll be on the way to downloading your own copy of the blockchain and having your own node set up. The problem with a setup like that is that you can't really, generally speaking, connect any mobile wallets to it. So if you were to want to transact when you're out and about and you run Bitcoin Core on your laptop and you wanted to send a transaction, the likelihood is you're not going to have your laptop with you. So you won't be able to spend as easily as some of the node options that we're going to come on to in a second. I'll just pause to see if Matt's got anything to add there.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're using Bitcoin Core or if you're using the built-in Bitcoin Core inspector, yeah, correct. You can't. The main negative is you can't use it with a mobile wallet. The other negative is your transaction and balance info will be on your computer. So if it's a computer you use for work or a computer you use to play games or look at porn or something like that, your social media habit, it might be easily compromised, and that becomes a privacy issue, because all your transaction history will be there and all of your balance history will be there. But also you can't use it with mobile wallets, which is a key component as well.
Yeah, so the next best option, and unfortunately the most expensive option, is what's known as a plug and play node. So this is where you'll buy essentially a small box from one of the various teams. To name a few, we've got Ronin Dojo, we've got Raspberry Blitz, we've got Start9, Umbrel. There's loads of different companies, or
MyNode,
MyNode, yeah. There's loads popping up, all with different feature sets. But essentially, they sell you a box that you plug in at home. You plug it into your router. You plug it into the power outlet, and then within a couple of clicks, you're off and running again to get your own copy of the blockchain and have your own node up and running.
And before we move on, Citadel Dispatch 26. I had all the major node teams on for a conversation on their node projects. So if you're interested in having one of these purpose-built boxes, or a lot of those projects that were just named allow you to actually buy the hardware separately and then install their software on it, consider listening to that Citadel Dispatch.
Right. So, and the kind of final option is the DIY approach, like Matt's just touched on, where all of the projects that we just said, will have a parts list. You can go away and buy, spend a couple $100 buying a hard drive and a single board computer and a couple of other cables, and build your own node and put your own software. Well, put the software that these teams provide onto that hardware. The end result is that you get the same node with all the same features. Obviously, the caveat is that you've got to go through the process of buying the hardware yourself, flashing the software onto a micro SD card, which might cause you some, if you're a less technical user and you're less comfortable with taking that approach. That's why these teams offer the plug and play node.
It does sound more intimidating than it actually is. And I would
absolutely.
So like I encourage new users to get their feet wet. Also just to go back a little bit about Bitcoin Core. I mean, if you're using, you can also use Bitcoin Core if you're running Bitcoin Core on the same computer you're running Spectre on, or Sparrow. They both can connect to it. If you do that process, you really should be using it on a dedicated computer. I know I kind of touched on that earlier when I said, if you're using it for playing games or social media, it could get compromised easier because you're using it for all these other general purposes. You're downloading software on it that maybe you haven't verified. You definitely haven't verified and have no idea what's really running there. So if you are going to go that approach, you should have a dedicated device. You should consider a dedicated computer, a dedicated phone that you are using with it. Yeah, in general, dedicated devices are going to be more secure and more private. When we talk about security in Bitcoin land, where you don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Don't get overwhelmed because your setup's not perfect. but at the same time, you're just trying to reduce your threats so that you're not the lowest hanging fruit. Most of the time when we see these hacks, it's targeted at the people that are most vulnerable.
Yeah, and just to go back to the DIY approach that I was outlining, all of these different projects that we've spoken about have got really, really good documentation and quite vibrant communities as well on Twitter, Telegram, or their own dedicated forum. So don't be afraid to, go and have a browse through the documentation. Like Matt said, it's not actually as scary as I might have made it sound. And also, go and ask some questions in the Telegram chat or in the Slack or whatever, chat room that the project has got. You'll probably find, or you'll definitely find that all of the people that are in these communities are really welcoming. They've definitely been in your position before now. And they found the thought of this really scary a couple of years ago. And, they might be running several DIY nodes. So don't be off put by it.
100%. I will echo that sentiment. I would just add a slight caveat that there are scammers in these Telegram groups and these chat rooms. They will often try and impersonate people that are involved with the project or other notable figures to try and get you to feel comfortable. Never give anybody your seed words, those secret backup words. Never give them their secret backup words. And, always be skeptical if someone in one of those groups tries to DM you separately and tries to go into a private chat. Sometimes it is legit, but you need to be extra cautious in that type of situation.
Yeah, and if somebody does, don't be afraid to ask in the sort of main room, tag the person who you think might have DM'd you and said, is this you DMing me?
Exactly.
But always just act on err on the side of caution, and keep that sort of adversarial mindset to think, why is this person reaching out to me completely out of the blue after I've just asked my first question entering the room?
100%. So all those node projects support something called Electrum Server, and Electrum Server is a standard. It's a standard way to interact with your own node. You can use those Electrum Server details, and then you can put them into Sparrow. You can put them into many of the mobile wallets that we mentioned earlier. You can put them into Blue Wallet. With Samurai specifically, they don't use Electrum Server. They use something called Dojo. And with that, pairing is as simple as there's a QR code, and you just scan the QR code with your Samurai wallet on your phone, and it'll pair up with your node.
Yeah, the good thing is with Dojo as well is it's implemented in the vast majority of the node packages now. There's more that have Dojo than don't, which is really great to see.
Indeed.
Should we hit on the CoinJoin?
Okay, so I just want, we're an hour in. If you're a newcomer, you just listen to this hour and you're intimidated as fuck. Don't be intimidated. Start with step one where we talked about acquiring your Bitcoin. Then, learn how to hold your own keys and slowly move through the process. Don't, freak yourself out that, now I got to run a node too. Like I'm really intimidated. Step by step, get your feet wet, get comfortable, send transactions, receive transactions, back up your wallet, restore your wallet. Just get comfortable with it. Get used to it. It's not something to be scared of. It's something that you learn by doing.
Yeah, I put out a tweet a couple of weeks ago actually that kind of echoes that if sending a transaction makes you feel a little bit uneasy, then you haven't sent enough transactions. You can see on screen there that the mempool is, it's a little bit busier than what it was, but a couple of sats per byte is going to get your transaction confirmed very quickly, and that's going to cost you, less than $1 to send a transaction. So
we don't have that on the list, but before we move on to CoinJoin on-chain privacy, UTXO management, we should probably, how does a newcomer choose what fee to pay? They open up their wallet, they go to send a transaction. How do Bitcoin transaction fees work? I feel like that is something we tend to gloss over.
Yeah, we overlooked that one. Well, fortunately, most of the good mobile wallets, especially the ones that we've mentioned on tonight's stream, will give you a couple of options where you can they'll either have three options, sort of low priority, medium priority, and high priority, like we can see on screen, or there might be a slider where you can manually adjust the fee, and essentially the higher that the fee you pay, the more likely that your transaction is going to be confirmed or processed quicker. Again, a caveat with that one, we've got a lot of caveats tonight, is that some of the fee estimations, these wallets all use different sort of algorithms as to how they calculate or estimate the fee that would be required to get you confirmed in the displayed priority. So Matt's got on screen here a really great website called mempool.space, which it shows you, again, the priority fee selections, or what it would advise based on, correct me if I'm wrong here, Matt, but based on what's currently in the mempool, as well as sort of historical data as well. So it's kind of always a really good sort of accurate look at, if you want to get your transaction processed within the next block. Right now, it would take an estimate of 13 sats per byte. But again, there's another caveat here that there's still transactions with much lower transaction fees than 13 sats per byte that will also get confirmed. So it's kind of it's not an exact science, I will say that,
Right.
but multiple sources is always a good one if you want to try and get it sort of nailed.
So, I mean, Bitcoin isn't run by a company. Bitcoin is a distributed network. And so as a result, how Bitcoin transactions work is we have this chain of transactions, and the transactions are within blocks. We call them blocks. Roughly every 10 minutes, there'll be a new Bitcoin block, and it will have finalized transactions included in that block. Until you get into a block, you sit in a waiting list. That waiting list we call that the mempool. We call it a mempool. Technically, every node has their own mempool. But if your internet connection is solid, in most situations, those mempools should all look the same. So when you go to mempool.space, you're looking at their mempool. That will look very similar to if you looked at the same thing on your own node, which a lot of these node projects, by the way, allow you to run mempool.space natively with your own node. So basically you have this like free market that's constantly going on where people are choosing which fee they're willing to spend, and miners are going to usually include you in a block based on your order in that waiting list, based on how much you want to spend. So if it's a transaction between someone you trust, and you're willing to wait a longer period of time, you can pay a lower fee. If you're sending just to yourself, you can pay the lowest fee. We call it, that's 1 sat per byte is the lowest fee, because you're just sending it to yourself. If in some crazy situation where a 1 sat per byte never gets confirmed ever, which we've never been through, you can always resend that transaction. So you're going to want to choose your transaction fee based on the urgency you want that transaction finalized on the network. And most good wallets will basically give you a low, medium, and high. This low being I can wait, medium being like I'm in the middle ground because it's medium, and high being I don't want to wait, I want it finalized as soon as possible.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it's a very much a dynamic thing. It's like a queue that's always evolving every single second, because there's more and more transactions being sent, every second, and it's not within, outside the realms of possibility that what the fee that you put up right this second might not be enough to get you immediately processed into the next block in sort of 5 minutes time. So it's very, very dynamic, and that's why I said it's not sort of an exact science. So generally speaking, for most people, the wallet estimators are pretty good, especially if it's an urgent transaction that you need to be processed immediately.
100%. I'm glad we covered that topic. Also, before we move on to the next topic, just to jump back with hardware wallets, the backup to that hardware wallet are those words you wrote down. You have the option of putting them into steel. These steel plates are available. Many different vendors offer the steel plates. And the idea there is if you put it into steel, obviously it's going to be water resistant, fire resistant. It's going to be more sturdy than paper. You might also consider making duplicates of those seed words and having them in different places. So like if your office burns down or your house burns down, it's still in the other location, with the caveat that it means it could be more likely that someone else finds it because it's in more locations. So you need to think about that very carefully. And then third of all, with hardware wallets, which I forgot to mention, one thing I like to tell new coiners is it's a good idea to buy 2 of whatever you decide to buy, because if you have a second one, you can have the same backup words initialized on both devices. So then if something happens to your device, not only do you have the seed words available, those secret backup words available to restore your device, you also have the second device that still has access to your funds. So you're not in a panic situation. So I tend to recommend to people that they should buy 2 of the same device, whichever they choose, so that they can have 2 initialized. And you can keep those in separate locations as well, if you want. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
So when you're opening up a Bitcoin wallet, it shows a balance. A common misconception is that it shows your Bitcoin balance, that's what's in your wallet. But in reality, what's in your wallet is basically a bunch of different Bitcoin transactions that all add up to that balance. We call those UTXOs. Those are unspent transaction outputs. UTXOs is what we call them. You can think of them like bills in your wallet. Like maybe your wallet, your cash wallet has $50 in it, but in reality, it has 2 20s and a 10. And that's how Bitcoin wallets work. So you have all these small UTXOs in there that add up to your balance. And that has privacy implications, because if 2 of those UTXOs come together in a single transaction, they're obviously linked on this chain forever, right? We call it the blockchain. It's this ledger of transactions. They'll be linked together because they were both spent in the same transaction. So that brings us to this idea of UTXO management and coin control, the idea of trying to manage those Bitcoin transactions in a privacy and cost-effective way. You want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. And quick, I will start with the 2 wallets that we keep mentioning, Blue Wallet and Samurai. Offer all the features that I'm just about to cover that sort of help when it comes to UTXO management.
And Sparrow and Spectre.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I keep referring to mobile wallets, but yeah, all of the desktop, the good desktop wallets that we've spoken about have all got UTXO management features as well. So there's a couple of facets to it. The first one is the ability to label the UTXOs or the pieces of Bitcoin that you've got in your wallet. So what would be an example of a label might be that if Matt was to pay me for dinner or pay me back for dinner, when I receive that transaction into my wallet, I could put a label on that to say that that's come from Matt and it was for dinner. I could then receive my wages from my employer, and I could put the relevant label on that just to know that where the origin of that UTXO is from. So once I've labeled them, when I'm making future transactions, and there's 2 ways you can make a transaction. You can let the wallet to construct it for you automatically, which they might choose any random UTXOs and merge them together, again, like Matt said, which will show common ownership. That might not be a problem. However, if you want to preserve your privacy, and I might not want my employer to know that I'm friends with Matt because he's a bad person, because I've labeled those.
I'm not a bad person, though.
Because I've labeled
theoretical.
Because I've labeled those UTXOs when I receive them at the time. In 2 weeks down the line, when I'm coming to make a transaction, I can then consider the person that I'm paying. Do I want them to know that I know Matt, or do I want them to know that I work for the company that paid me with this UTXO? I can make that informed decision then to say, well, actually, I'm just going to spend from one of those pieces of Bitcoin, or actually, it's not a bad thing. Matt's not really a bad person. I'm going to combine the 2. because the value that I want to send, I need to combine the two. So those are the two sort of main facets to it. But obviously you can't make an informed decision when you come to spend if you don't know the origins of all of the UTXOs that you've got. So they kind of go hand in hand, really. You need to label so that when you go to spend, you can make the informed decision as to whether you should merge or not.
Yeah, so a key aspect of Bitcoin is if someone sends you Bitcoin, they can see where that Bitcoin goes in the future. And if you receive Bitcoin, you can see where that Bitcoin came from in the past. So this is why labeling is important, because you want to know where that transaction came from or it goes to, because that's who you're exposing your privacy to in that situation. Is that a good distillation?
Yeah, which might not be a problem for, so the person that I'm paying might not be able to or be clever enough to use blockchain analysis. But the other sort of adversary that we need to consider here is chain analysis firms that might be trying to cluster or monitor your on-chain activity, who you're spending to, who you're getting change back from, to monitor your habits, to try and piece together the identity, because the blockchain doesn't have any identities at the blockchain layer, but these companies work to kind of tie all the pieces together so that they can de-anonymize people. So it's not just a case of hiding how much you earn from your friend. It's also these more sophisticated actors that have got a lot more resources to throw at this, that you've also got to bear in mind as well, unfortunately.
Yeah. You both don't want your employer to know what you're spending things on, and you don't want the guy who sells you a sandwich to know how much money you make. But on top of that, we also have these professional surveillance mercenaries that work for governments, dictators, and companies, and they are just out there constantly trying to track Bitcoin transactions. So you also have that as a concern.
Which leads us nicely onto CoinJoin, I think, unless there's anything else you want to touch on.
No, we can talk about CoinJoin now.
So CoinJoin is a coordinated or collaborative transaction where you and at least one other person will collaborate to construct a transaction that casts some doubt as to the origin and the output of the transaction, to make sure that can you still hear me?
I can still hear you, yes.
Oh, sorry, I thought I dropped out. Yes, it's a CoinJoin is a collaborative transaction where the idea is that somebody watching the blockchain, again, chain surveillance firm, your employer, your friend, whoever, they can't deterministically or with good probability be able to track the people on the input side of the transaction to the output side of the transaction. So it effectively attempts to put up sort of a brick wall in your, the UTXO's history, so that anybody looking on chain can't be sure 100%. Is there one person involved in this transaction? Is there 10 people involved in this transaction? It just casts doubt on the path that the Bitcoin has taken, and who sort of has the Bitcoin changed hands, hasn't it? We're not really sure.
So tracking Bitcoin is a probability game. These surveillance companies and their tools will basically, or just someone who's curious and trying to spy on you, will basically assign a probability to every transaction if ownership has changed. Because one of the things about Bitcoin is, I could send Bitcoin to myself, or I could send it to Bitcoin Q&A, and the chain doesn't delineate between that. So a key aspect of tracking Bitcoin transactions is determining some kind of probability that Bitcoin actually changed hands, and then from there trying to see which hands it went from who to who. So CoinJoin is this idea of a collaborative transaction, and you can think of it like, just for an example, if you have 5 people that are doing a CoinJoin together, instead of having a simple path that you're following on chain and deciding if ownership has changed, all of a sudden there's 5 different potential paths it could go down. You don't know which of the 5 people that participated, which of their 5 outputs are them. So it breaks that probability chain, and it's a useful tool in terms of trying to you have forward privacy, have this idea of someone who sent you Bitcoin doesn't necessarily know which path your Bitcoin took going forward. Yeah,
and specifically with implementations of CoinJoin like Whirlpool, which are known as equal output CoinJoins, the sort of notion is that everybody on the output side, all of the UTXOs on the output side of the transaction look absolutely identical. So it's kind of, I always like to use the analogy of V for Vendetta, where you've got the Million Mask March. It's essentially the same thing, but on the blockchain, where all of these UTXOs are indistinguishable from one another. So like Matt said, you've got some forward privacy.
And
very quick.
And so the 3 major CoinJoin projects are Samurai, Whirlpool, Join Market, and Wasabi. Citadel Dispatch 15 was with the Wasabi team. Citadel Dispatch 16 was with the Join Market team. And Citadel Dispatch, I don't know where he is. I also did a Samurai one. Is Citadel Dispatch, it's there in your feed somewhere. You know, Stefan can just rattle them off. He knows exactly which one is which.
Always amazes me that.
I don't know which one it is. I'll come back to it and tell you, but there's another Citadel Dispatch with the Samurai team. So if you're interested in this, consider going back and listening to those 3. Me and Bitcoin Q&A, like Samurai, Whirlpool the best. You can also, you don't have to use Samurai Wallet with it. You can use Sparrow Wallet with it as well.
Yeah, co-sign that. Samurai or Sparrow, hands down winners for me, especially from a beginner's perspective. Definitely the easiest ones to get started with, in my opinion.
You can continue on. I'm trying to figure out which fucking dispatch.
I'll cover off one quick question that's quite on topic. Somebody asked, what's the difference between CoinJoin that we've just spoken about and a coin tumbler? So unfortunately the words or the meanings have been kind of whitewashed somewhat over the years, but generally speaking, a coin tumbler is a centralized service where you will have to send in your Bitcoin and give up custody of it to whoever's running the tumbler, and they will send you somebody else's Bitcoin back. I absolutely wouldn't recommend anybody use these because you're putting yourself completely in the hands of whoever's running the tumbler, that, you know, whether they're going to send you your Bitcoin back or not. So
and you also, so not only you're trusting them with your Bitcoin if you use a custodial mixer, it's the same idea as custody, custodial risk with wallets. You're trusting them with your privacy and your funds. So the key aspect of CoinJoin is the idea that you are reducing trust in any kind of centralized third party. Wasabi and Samurai have a centralized server that they do, that they use to coordinate the CoinJoins to make them easier, better UX, and more reliable. Those coordinators are blinded. With Samurai specifically, you can use it without your own node, and then you're trusting Samurai's node. So that goes back to our earlier conversation about using your own node. You should use your own node when you use Samurai. Otherwise, you are trusting them with your transaction and balance information, as is the case with all light wallets. I found it so it's Citadel Dispatch 15 is Wasabi, Citadel Dispatch 16 is Join Market, and Citadel Dispatch 30 is Samurai. So consider listening to those.
Okay, I think are we done on CoinJoin? Should we move on to the next topic?
I have multisig as the next topic, but should we do Lightning real quick first?
Sure thing. Yeah, I think it's apt. So a quick high level on what the Lightning Network is. It is a scaling solution for Bitcoin that allows you to transact with actual real Bitcoin, but you don't do so with what's known as an on-chain footprint. So it allows you to sort of lock up a small amount of, well, as much Bitcoin as you want onto this second layer solution known as the Lightning Network, so that you can you essentially just defer the overall settlement of any number of transactions from going on chain to reduce fees, and also to allow you to transact much quicker. So whereas one on-chain transaction, might cost you a couple hundred sats depending on the fees, you might be able to send 10 or even 100 Lightning Network transactions for the same amount of fees. Now there is unfortunately lots of caveats with the Lightning Network again, in terms of being able to do it properly. With the best way to do so will be with one of the node packages that we've spoken about before, which will dictate that you need to manage your own sort of your own channels, which is essentially where you lock up this Bitcoin to be able to transact on this second layer. So it's a little bit more of a hurdle to get on board with, but you sort of can save yourself a fair bit on fees, especially if we ever see a fee spike again, which I think is inevitable. I don't know if I've done a good job there,
it's
man.
inevitable. So first of all, there's been a lot of dispatches on Lightning. If you go through the feed, consider listening to those. There's like a lot of different caveats and nuances when using Lightning, specifically with privacy. I did a full privacy episode with OpenNobs and Anthony. That's Citadel Dispatch 21. That's on Lightning privacy. So consider checking that out. But the main differentiation that you as a new user should think about with Lightning is going back to our transaction fee conversation earlier, which is when you use a regular Bitcoin transaction, your transaction fee is not based on the amount you send. It could be kind of weird for you. It's actually based on the amount of UTXOs that you use for the transaction. It's based on the data size, not the amount of money that is sent. So you could end up sending a $5 transaction with Bitcoin on chain, a regular Bitcoin transaction, and it could cost the same as sending a $5 million transaction. Now with Lightning, it's different. The way fees are calculated on Lightning is based on the amount you're sending. So that'll be more comparable to something that you're used to in traditional finance world, where if you send more money, you're going to pay a higher fee. You send less money, you're going to pay a lower fee. Now, Moon Wallet with 2 U's, as we talked about earlier, mobile wallet supports Lightning, and Blue Wallet supports Lightning. Now, if you use Blue Wallet in its default state with Lightning, it's going to be a custodial wallet, which I don't love. If you insist on using it, use it with a small amount because they can take your funds. You are trusting them with your privacy. You can also use Blue Wallet with something called LND Hub, which some of these node projects offer. I think Umbrel and my node offer it. I don't know who else offers it, but if you use it with LND Hub or your friend's LND Hub, then it's not custodial with Blue Wallet. It's custodial with who's ever running the LND Hub. So if you run the LND Hub yourself, then it's not custodial. Other Lightning specific wallets on mobile that you can use. So Moon does both. Blue Wallet does both. Then there's Lightning specific mobile wallets that are very good. There's Phoenix Wallet. There's Breeze Wallet. Breeze, BREEZ, continuing the Bitcoin naming scheme of using words and spelling them differently. Is there another Lightning wallet that I'm missing? Lightning specific.
You've got XIII as well, haven't you?
Well, XIII is Phoenix. Phoenix is there.
Yeah, there's two separate wallets.
They have. Why do they have two? Okay, but yeah, both of those are good.
One allows you to manage your own channels, and the other one does it for you.
Okay, Phoenix does it for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so forget XIII. You're a new coiner. you have Phoenix, and you have Breeze Wallet, or you can use Moon or Blue Wallet. And that's, rather than for savings, you should think of that more as, okay, this is like my spending wallet. My transaction fees are based on the amount I send. I'm going to be sending smaller amounts. So I might use Lightning, right?
Yeah, agree. I'm quite a big fan of Phoenix, especially from a perspective of, you know, a wallet that manages the channels for you. I might get a lot of shit for this in the chat, but I'm a firm believer that most new users shouldn't strive to dive headfirst into Lightning with their own channels, because it's not easy, it's not approachable, and everything that we've already discussed in terms of holding your own keys, using CoinJoin, and not using KYC are far more important than striving to get your own channels up and running quickly. I don't know what you think about that, Matt, and I'm waiting for the shit in the chat.
No, I mean, I think Lightning on mobile, with the wallets we just mentioned, Moon, Blue, Breeze, Phoenix, for smaller spending amounts, is very accessible. Actually, if you actually want to do Lightning in a proper sovereign way, that I would say is a more advanced thing. Don't get intimidated by it, but I think it's important for our all-encompassing getting started guide that we do mention it exists, and what are the different trade-offs. Basically, the trade-off there is a little bit, you're getting less security, you're getting less reliability with Lightning, but you're getting lower fees, faster transactions, all else equal. And it could be very useful in a mobile spending type of situation.
Yeah, agree. Phoenix and Breeze, really great ways to get started with Lightning that have sort of their own unique trade-offs that kind of give the best of both worlds from a new user perspective when you compare them with custodial solutions like the default Blue Wallet or running your own channels. I think that's one of the
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like Moon so much. Like Moon with 2 U's has like different trade-offs. It doesn't have a standardized backup process. It's, if you're, a lot of Bitcoiners will say it's, not a Lightning wallet, but at the end of the day, it's not a Lightning wallet because you store all your funds on chain. You're not storing it in a proper Lightning wallet. But what's cool about Moon is if you scan a QR code, it could be a Lightning QR code, or it could be a regular Bitcoin QR code, and it just automatically figures that out for you. And vice versa. Yeah. So you can have some spending cash in your Moon wallet, MUUN, and whatever Bitcoin QR code you scan, it will send. But it doesn't have power user features. It doesn't have that coin selection that we were talking about with UTXO management. It doesn't have labeling. It doesn't have a standard backup process. So these are all things to keep in mind.
Right. Okay.
Multisig. Let's go.
Here's where we get into the weeds a little bit. Right. So
we've been in the weeds for a while, brother.
All of the wallets that we've spoken about, the desktop wallets, mobile wallets, all operate on what we colloquially call a single sig setup, where they have a single secret or backup, which is required when you want to spend your Bitcoin. A multisig wallet is where you combine 2 or more of these separate wallets together to create a brand new wallet. When you set up this multisig wallet, you can dictate the minimum amount of keys required to be able to make to sign or authorize a send transaction. So that could be 2 from a possible 3 keys is a popular one, all the way up to something elaborate like 11 or 15, which might be used in sort of a business setting perhaps. But 2 of 3, where you need 2 signers from a possible 3 that were created that were used to create the wallet to sign off on any transactions from that wallet. So why would you want to do that? Well, with a single sig wallet, some of the theoretical attack vectors, if somebody was to steal your device and while, you know, if they snatch your phone while it's out of your hand and you've got your wallet unlocked, they can steal your Bitcoin. If that was one of the keys in a multi-sig wallet where you needed 2 to spend from, then they can't steal anything from you. Another one of the attacks that multisig protects from is known as a retirement attack, where there might be a malicious hardware wallet vendor that doesn't publish their source code, and they have some malware baked into the device that is actually has the ability to steal your Bitcoin. I will say, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, Matt, but that has never happened. Again, it's a theoretical attack. But if you were to use a multi-sig setup where you've got different hardware wallet manufacturers, if one of those is malicious, they can't get access to your funds because they don't have, you know, if it's just 1 key out of 2 that are required, they don't have the minimum number of keys required to steal anything.
Right.
So that's another attack vector.
So all the good wallets, all the good hardware wallets are open source. So theoretically, open source means that the code is available for you to verify, and you can read the code line by line. Now, if you're a new coiner, you're probably up to this point, you're already really intimidated. You're like, Matt, I can't read code. I'm aware. Okay. So at the end of the day, it is very good that you're able to technically verify the code, but most people will be updating their hardware wallets and they will not be verifying the code. So there is some trust that you're trusting that hardware wallet manufacturer to not ship malicious code to you, and you're also trusting them that the actual device wasn't compromised when it was first sent to you, right? So with multisig, the idea is you can have multiple, but specifically in a hardware wallet multisig, the idea is you can have multiple vendors that are multiple different hardware wallets that come together to form your wallet, and you need a combination of them. As Bitcoin Q&A was saying, a common one is 2 of 3. You need 2 of them to spend the funds. This reduces trust in any specific hardware wallet manufacturer. You also have the added benefit that those backup words, instead of those backup words being a one and done situation, if someone finds those secret backup words, we call them seed words. If someone finds those words, they have access to your funds. In a multi-sig setup, you have multiple sets of backup words, and they have to find the required threshold of backup words in order to spend your funds. So if you're using a 2 of 3, you're going to have 3 sets of backup words. You're going to have 3 hardware wallets. Those backup words obviously can be on steel, as we said earlier, and you can have them in different locations. So Bitcoin with multisig gives you this unique situation where you can have a geographically distributed security setup where you're holding your own coin, but the keys to access it can be located in different places. They can be duplicated. You can keep copies of them in different places. And for someone to actually compromise you and take your funds, they're going to need to have access to a combination secret. We lost Bitcoin Q&A about 2 minutes ago or a minute and a half ago, and I'm just going to keep talking until he reconnects. So that is the main benefit of multisig. Do not get intimidated here. Plenty of people store Bitcoin in single sig setups. It is the normal way of setting it up. This is something you might graduate to. Multisig, UX, multisig. I guess UX can be kind of a complicated word. Like the way you interface with the multisig wallet is a relatively new thing in Bitcoin. So it has a little bit more of a learning curve. It is a little bit more rough around the edges. So you want to get really comfortable with it. As I said earlier, you want to be backing up, restoring, spending, receiving, getting comfortable with it separately of your single sig setup. Now, one cool aspect of multisig is that you can actually have a single sig wallet. So you can be using a hardware wallet that is single sig, and then you can take that single sig and you can actually also use it in a multi-sig environment. And it can be one signer of, for instance, the 2 of 3 in the multi-sig, but also it could also be its separate wallet. And I guess the main advantage there, I guess there's 2 main advantages there. First of all, if someone finds your single sig backup, your secret words, it might have some small amount of funds on it, and they think that's all your funds. They can't tell that it's in a multi-sig setup. So they might just take that funds and think they took all your Bitcoin. The secondary benefit is that, you know, you can repurpose these hardware wallets and use them for multiple wallets. Now, one other caveat here is with multisig, you do want to back up additional information besides just your seed words. Bitcoin Q&A came in and then left again, so I will continue. The popular multisig software, Sparrow, Spectre supports it, Blue Wallet supports it. They will tell you what you need to back up and make sure you save all that information. Now, that information, that additional information that's not your seed words, they will have terms like derivation path, descriptor, a list of something called XPubs. You don't necessarily have to know what all of that means. You just have to save it, and you just have to realize that while seed words are a security risk, if someone gets your seed words, that information, that separate information that you have to back up with a multi-sig wallet is a privacy risk. So if someone finds that, they can see how much you're holding in the multi-sig, but they can't necessarily spend it. But you need that information plus your backup words in order to spend your funds. Bitcoin Q&A, are you back?
I am. Apologies for that, man. I don't know what happened. I think it's my network.
No worries at all. I just continued on and I just kept talking about multisig.
I knew you'd be holding it down.
I think we are, I think I sufficiently explained multisig trade-offs and benefits. Should we move on to mistakes, common mistakes?
Yeah, did you cover sort of the alternatives to doing it yourself, the multi-sig approach?
No, I didn't. That's great. Why don't you go into that?
Yeah, so obviously Matt's just outlined some of the potential pitfalls with doing it yourself. So one of the other options is known as kind of collaborative custody alternatives, where there will be a centralized service. Some examples are Unchained Capital and Casa, where they will help you coordinate a multi-sig quorum, where they hold one of the keys, so that in the event that you were to, so I'll give you an example. You'd have a key on your mobile phone, you'd have a key on a hardware wallet, and one of these services will hold a key as well. So they only have one key, so they can't steal from you, which is great. But if you were to lose, say, your phone key or the key on your hardware wallet and you didn't have it backed up, they will be able to step in as a third party to help you move your Bitcoin, so that in a doomsday scenario, you don't lose your life savings, which is really great. You will pay for this service. Again, I'm not sure on how much each charge. The bottom tier, I think, is just over $100 last time that I checked per year. One of the trade-offs with this is that unless you sign up without your personal information, which I believe is quite difficult to do, these centralized entities that hold the key and part of your multi-sig quorum, they know who you are, they know how much Bitcoin you hold in that wallet, because they hold one of the keys, and they also hold the sort of the wallet file, if you like, to put it simply, so that they can, just as a KYC exchange can, be able to tie you to your Bitcoin identity. So it's worth weighing up the trade-offs.
Yeah, and you're using their node. So the assumption is, if you do this, if you use one of these providers, you're trusting them with your privacy, but they will hold your hand and they will have a spare key for you as well. And they will help you onboard into the process. They will help you get hardware wallets. They will go through that whole process, but you are trusting them with your privacy. They know your transactions. They know your balances. And in 99% of situations, they know who you are as well. They'll know the IP address of your devices that you connect from. This is all kind of getting a little bit too much into the weeds, but the key is that you're trusting them with your privacy. I was explaining earlier, just basically doing it yourself so you could use your own node and you aren't trusting someone. In that situation, you can still have other people hold keys for you. So Bitcoin Q&A started with a 2 of 3 setup because that's a very common setup, but another common setup is a 3 of 5 setup. And if you do a 3 of 5 setup, you have 5 total keys and you need 3 to spend. So if you need 3 to spend, you can hold 3 keys yourself so that you know you have, and you put them in different locations and you know you have enough to spend it yourself. But then you can also have, you know, a family member, a friend, a lawyer hold a key. You can have different combinations of people hold the key. So it can be very useful in specifically in situations where you're trying, like inheritance situations where you're, if you pass away, you have large Bitcoin savings, you know, maybe a lawyer is holding one in a trust, maybe a couple family members are holding individual ones, and they basically all need to collaborate together in order to spend your funds if you have 3 keys with other people. But you can also do it in a way where they never have the threshold. They need to compromise you plus combine together.
Yeah, I think just one final thing before we move on to the next topic. Inheritance is a big one for me that I sort of like to drive over people who seem keen to kind of jump into the DIY approaches. That, you know, you might have spent some time listening to some podcasts, watching some tutorials or reading some guides and feel comfortable in setting up a multisig setup. But what happens if you're not around tomorrow unexpectedly? Is your spouse, your next of kin, are they going to be able to coordinate a spend from a 2 of 3 or a 3 of 5? Do they know where to find the keys? Do they know how to recover it? If the answer is no to any of those questions, then all of your life savings disappears when you disappear. So something to bear in mind, especially if you're going to take the DIY approach.
100%. I'd also add that there's a middle ground here, specifically supported by Cold Card, called seed XOR. And basically in that situation, instead of having 1 seed, it's not multisig, but instead of having 1 seed, you have 2 seeds and you need both of them in order to spend your funds. So it's a little bit different than multisig. It can be more accessible to people because you don't have these additional complications that we were just discussing with multisig. But it gives you that benefit of not having a single seed backup words that can be compromised by someone. There's also something that's supported by pretty much every wallet out there called a passphrase. And in that situation, you have these backup words are usually 12-word phrases or 24-word phrases. The passphrase is the 13th word or the 25th word, and you pick that yourself. So if you do that method, then you can keep the passphrase separate from your backup words. If someone wants to compromise you, they need access to both. And I mean, if it's a weak passphrase, they might just take your backup words and keep trying passphrases. But it adds an additional burden on them to try and compromise you without going through a multisig setup. Another interesting thing about passphrases is you can store money on the bare backup words, and then you can when you use a passphrase, it's a separate wallet. So in that situation, you can actually keep funds on your basic backup words. And then if someone finds that, they'll just steal that money, and they might not know you have a passphrase with the majority of your savings in it. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Awesome. Do you want to cover off some common mistakes? I think that was next on the list.
Yeah, I think common mistakes is a good spot to go next.
So I've got quite a lengthy list here, and the first one of which, unfortunately, I fell prey to a little bit. and that is it comes back to our very first point really of KYC at multiple exchanges without any real need to really. So I've just sort of exposed myself to put my name on loads of different databases. So it's an unfortunate one that you can't really undo, like we spoke about before. If you were to listen to this podcast and decide that you still want to go for a KYC exchange because you think you're not up to the task of going no KYC, try and limit your exposure to this by just signing up with one reputable exchange. I think that's a good one to start.
Did you? I think that's very good advice. Like, if you are going to use a KYC service where you're providing your identity information, you should choose it carefully. You should choose someone you trust the most, and you should not sign up for. A lot of people just sign up for a ton of different services. You should sign up for the bare minimum. Ideally, if you're going to do it, you sign up for one. You use it solely just to buy Bitcoin and then send it to your own wallets. And you don't use any other additional KYC services. You want to limit that as much as possible. Second thing is, did you change your mic setup at all? Because it's way worse now than it was before.
I changed my computer. I'll have a play around while you're talking now, Tino. Is it just quiet?
No, we can hear you, but it's just like breaking up a little bit. It's like cutting in and out.
All right, I'll have a play around.
Another common mistake that I see people make is, I mean, gambling on shitcoins. So a lot of people will think that Bitcoin is too expensive, and I've missed the boat, and I'm too late to Bitcoin. Literally every single person who has entered Bitcoin at any time in Bitcoin history has thought they were too late. There's like a famous screenshot of someone on one of the Bitcoin forums lamenting that they didn't get in at 5 cents and instead they got in at $1 and they were too late and they missed the bus. So everyone feels that way. You're not alone in that. It's important to realize that you can transact in smaller units of account. We call them sats. So you don't have to have a full Bitcoin. You don't need, like right now, Bitcoin's at almost $70,000. You don't need to put $70,000 in to use Bitcoin. Sats are the smallest unit of Bitcoin. There's 100 million of them per Bitcoin. And right now, sats, you can get 1,500 for $1. So you can send any amount of sats you want to send. You can send $2 worth. You can send 25 cents worth. It doesn't matter. Don't get caught up in thinking that Bitcoin is too expensive. What common thing that these other coins will do is they make it so they have so many units that it seems like it's cheaper than it is, just to try and get you in the door. It's a marketing tactic. So just keep that in mind. Q&A, you there?
Yeah, how's my mic now?
Oh, so much better. I'm glad I brought it up.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Do you have more common mistakes?
Yeah, common one is just not practicing enough with transacting, testing my backups for my hardware wallets, testing different wallets, even using testnet. Just practice, and getting comfortable using the various tools that we've spoken about. Getting comfortable with it, either using testnet, which is basically a carbon copy of Bitcoin that holds no value. You can get it for free on websites called Faucets, where you can go on and just mimic the normal behavior of a wallet without the fear of losing any real value. So you can send some testnet Bitcoin to your hardware wallet. You can wipe it, recover it, just to get really, really comfortable with that process, so that if the worst was to happen and something was to happen to your house, where you store your Bitcoin or wherever you store your Bitcoin, when you're in that panic state, it's not like the first time that you touch your hardware wallet for 5 years, because you've done that, periodical practice, or you've practiced lots of times, you're seeing real value in there, that it's second nature to you, because if you're in a panic and you need to move your Bitcoin quickly, the last thing you want to be doing is doing it sort of in an unfamiliar situation, or in a situation where you're not really comfortable and familiar, because that's when mistakes happen and you could muck something up.
Yeah, so we see that happen a lot where, people, so I actually don't, especially for newcomers, I don't know if you need to use testnet. It adds just another complication to your process. But what happens a lot is, like, people will buy Bitcoin, they'll send it to a hardware wallet. They never really get comfortable with it. Then Bitcoin goes up in value significantly, and like 4 years later, they're trying to spend it and they're just not comfortable at all. So you really want to get comfortable with it. You want to practice sending, receiving, backing up, and restoring. And just, I don't think testnet's necessary in that situation, because you should just do it with the small amounts. Send $5 back and forth, erase the wallet, restore it from your backup, see that your $5 are still there. One nice thing about my earlier approach that I mentioned, of having two of the same hardware wallet, is without putting funds at risk at all, you can load up one hardware wallet with some Bitcoin, and then you can restore it on your second hardware wallet. You can load up those secret words onto that hardware wallet, and if your funds are there and you can spend them, then you did the backup and restore process correctly without actually wiping the original wallet. So that's another benefit. You're basically verifying your backup and restore process. You don't want to be in the situation where you have a lot of money and on the line, and you've never done a backup, you've never done a restore process, and you're just freaking out, and maybe you wrote down the words wrong. I've had that happen to friends where we've had to guess the word that they wrote down wrong, or wrote down in bad handwriting. So you don't want to be in that situation. You want to practice.
I think just to add to that backup process as well, is that most of the hardware wallets that we've spoken about this evening have multiple different types of backups as well. So I think it's worth noting that practice using both of them as well. So we've got the seed words. Both Coldcard and Passport also offer encrypted backups as well, where you can store a backup onto a micro SD card, which is a little bit easier to store. So I would urge people to practice restoring from both methods as well, because at the end of the day, if in a doomsday scenario, you don't know which method of backup you're actually going to have access to, or which has survived whatever doomsday scenario has actually happened.
100%. Before we move on to more common mistakes, we have Alex McCluskey in the chat asking about 401k IRA funds. If you're trying to hold Bitcoin in a tax beneficial way in your retirement account, I would just keep this very simple. If you do have a 401k or an IRA where you already have funds in it and you want to move them into Bitcoin, just consider using the service offered by Unchained Capital. That's unchained.com. Disclosure, they are a sponsor of my other show, Rabbit Hole Recap. This show does not have sponsors, but they're a sponsor because they're a good team. It's a good product. I have friends there that are working there. My buddy Jeff Andrew runs their retirement division, and they will hold your hand. They will help you through it. Obviously, as we said earlier, the caveat is you're trusting them with your privacy. But pretty much in all situations with retirement funds, if you're using a tax beneficial retirement method, you're going to have to trust someone, because it's all getting reported to the government as well. The nice thing about what Unchained does is you hold your own keys. So you get that tax benefit, but you're holding your own keys. They can't spend your funds. A lot of the other programs that are out there can spend your funds at will, and you have to trust them completely with the security of your funds and your privacy. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, the next one from me is kind of a little bit more outside of the box. I lurked around on Bitcoin Twitter and in some of the communities for a lot longer than I really should have. When I started to interact with people in the wallet chat rooms or the no chat rooms, to use a few examples, my knowledge grew exponentially from then onwards, from having those interactions versus me just sitting on the sidelines and kind of liking a few tweets every now and then. So if I was to go back and kind of have my time again, I'd absolutely start getting involved and start contributing to the conversation much earlier, because personally speaking anyway, my knowledge just skyrocketed compared to where I was just a couple of years ago. So big one for me, that one.
Yeah, that's I think like learn by doing, right? Practice with small amounts, and get your feet wet rather than feel intimidated and feel like you have to read everything and listen to everything and watch everything before you even get your feet wet.
Yeah, another one as well is, and Matt might roll his eyes at this one, is kind of going public. There's a lot of value in staying in the proverbial shadow, so to speak. I would urge people, not to sort of start shouting from the rooftops that they own Bitcoin again, because we talked earlier about KYC and how it kind of can paint a sort of red cross on your back a little bit. Well, shouting from the rooftops when Bitcoin hits an all-time high to all your friends might inadvertently do the same thing one day. You never know who's going to get a little bit jealous. You never know who's going to get jealous and tell somebody else who's an individual that might want to try and get their hands on it. So I would be candid about who you speak to Bitcoin about. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, that one, because I think we've all got a little bit of a personal responsibility to try and help on board others as well. So all I would say is just kind of be selective about who you speak to it and what you say.
Yeah, it is. It might sound a little hypocritical coming from me as a public Bitcoin figure, but definitely in the beginning, you should not be talking. You should try and reduce how much you talk about Bitcoin. Don't make it obvious that you own Bitcoin. Don't post on social media. Consider using a name like Bitcoin Q&A does. I mean, it might surprise you, but he wasn't born with that name. He decided on that name himself for the internet, for his Bitcoin work. In the future, if you do want to become more public about it, you can do so in a more responsible way, rather than doing it right in the beginning. You can never come back from it once you do it. So it's something to keep in mind. You should never talk about your own Bitcoin. You should never talk about how much Bitcoin you have. These are best practices. You don't even if it's a friend or a family member, it might seem like a small amount today, but in the future, it could be a large amount, and they will not forget it. They tend to remember. One of the first questions most friends and family will ask you is how much Bitcoin you own. They love asking that question. Do not answer it. Explain why you don't want to answer it for them. If people do know you own Bitcoin, this is where that multi-sig setup really shines, because you can have it geographically distributed. You can have your keys in different locations that are far away from each other, that make you getting compromised more difficult, even in a physical attack situation. And obviously, it is more ideal to live in a place where you have proper gun rights and you can defend yourself. So these are things to consider. If I was to do it again, I probably would not be, as public as I am about Bitcoin. I made a judgment call later on in my Bitcoin journey that I felt we needed more public Bitcoin figures that were talking about real issues and specifically privacy. So I made that judgment call, but there are some mornings that I wake up and regret it. But there are precautions you can take, and there are benefits, though, to being semi-public about your Bitcoin usage. meeting people. I've met some of the best people. You know, I have family now that wouldn't exist otherwise. But these are all things that you should consider as part of your Bitcoin journey. But in the beginning, very, very, very strongly would say, you know, keep it as discreet as possible. You never know, you know, you don't want to expose yourself to a malicious actor. Your government could turn on Bitcoin. A foreign government can use that information against you if you're traveling across a border or something like that. So you want to keep this in mind.
Yeah, the final sign-off one for me would be just completely got out of my brain. What was another one? 2FA is another one, a good one to touch on, I think.
Yes.
Would be if you, and it's just come back into me now, so I've got 2 to finish off. If you, again, listen to this podcast, decide that No-KYC is not for you and you want to sign up for an exchange, a lot of these exchanges will prompt you to use SMS-based two-factor authentication to, I'm using air quotes here, to secure your account. This is where you'll get a text message to, when you try and log into the exchange, they'll send you a text message to authorize that login. There have been multiple instances where this has been exploited. People have had their information and their accounts hacked on these exchanges, which, if you unfortunately have got funds on that account, can be withdrawn to whoever's got access to your account. They can withdraw it to their own wallet. A better alternative would be to use an app-based two-factor authentication. So an example would be there's one called OTP. There's one called XIII. There's another one called help me out here, Matt. I've drawn a blank.
Did you say Aegis?
Yeah, I said Aegis. Yeah,
Aegis is my favorite.
Any app-based one, far more secure, and there's been
Aegis is open source. Aegis is open source. Yep. That's AEGIS, and the backup process is very easy. You got to remember when you use these authenticator apps, if your phone dies, you want to make sure you have a backup of them. So the most popular one is Google Authenticator, and it's not I haven't used it in maybe 6 years or something like that, but previously it wasn't easy to back up. So make sure you're using one that is easy to back up, and back it up and keep multiple copies.
Yeah, or the other alternative is you can get like a physical device that acts as the second factor authentication. Looks like a bit of a USB key that provides the additional authorization, but less services tend to offer compatibility with those.
100%. I would say, I think for most people, a physical device is overkill. Can a sophisticated attacker compromise a phone-based two-factor? Yes. Have we seen any widespread cases of that? No. Do they still need your email and your password? Yes. On that note, you shouldn't be using the same emails and the same passwords in different places. If you go to haveibeenpwned.com, you can put your email address in and it'll tell you whenever a database gets leaked with your email or your password or your personal information. So that's a very important resource. But what we see a lot of times is like there'll be like a leak, like maybe Facebook will get hacked, and those emails and passwords will then be used at all the other services to try and get into your account. So that two-factor code gives you an additional protection on top of that, but you really should be trying to limit reuse of email addresses and never reuse passwords.
Yeah, there's one in the chat. Scooby Snacks is asking, is a password manager a good idea? Yes, definitely. Would recommend it to anybody. My personal favorite is Bitwarden. Again, another free and open source software. They do offer a paid version as well, but the freemium option is perfectly good enough for 99% of users, I would say.
Yeah, Bitwarden's great. You just gotta, if you're using a password manager, there's some nuance there, because if you're not self-hosting your password manager, you're using what's the main one? LastPass. People love LastPass. It's closed source. You're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. So there's some concern there. You know, if you have all your passwords in this password manager and that password manager gets compromised, then all of your accounts are compromised. What I think is like a very easy, accessible thing for new users or people that are concerned is your really important passwords. You can just write them in a notebook. You write them in a notebook. Someone's going to need to get access to that notebook physically in order to compromise you. You might not want to write it out completely clear. You know, maybe some things you remember versus some things are on the paper. You can develop your own like kind of code system. Don't overcomplicate it. You'll probably forget the password. But paper and pen is a tried and true method.
Yeah, absolutely. And
but don't put it on a post-it note on like your computer either.
The final one that went out of my head before was, we've spoken about, you know, there's a lot of information in the past couple of hours. Don't try and do everything in the space of a week, especially if you are literally at step one. I would sort of pick one of these topics. You know, we spoke about them in a specific order for a reason. I would urge people to sort of start from step one and try and master each step before they move to before they move on, or at least not try to do too many of them at the same time. Yes. Depending on the approach that you take for the different tools that we've spoken, you know, to do it properly and to do it justice and to understand it and practice it like we've been sort of reiterating, is going to take you, you know, a good bit of time. You're gonna have to dedicate some time to do this and to master some of these tools. So trying to do too much too soon is setting yourself up to fail. So take your time, be deliberate about it, and sort of master something, then move on.
Yeah, and that's great advice. And as Bitcoin Q&A said, our order in this episode was intentional. So don't feel like you have to go through all the steps at once, but go through that order. Was how we chose that order specifically because we think it's a very efficient, effective, managing trade-offs and stuff balance of what order you should kind of be coming into this. We also have some person in the chat who uses the NIM some person. So every time I call him out in the chat, I sound like I just don't care about his name. Asking for the best two-factor app for iOS. I really like Authenticator Plus for iOS users. I think it's available on Android as well, but if you're on Android, I really just like Aegis. So yeah, there you go for that answer. I have on this list Bitcoin Q&A. I have common questions. Do you have common questions that you have in mind, or?
I've got nothing noted down, but kind of off the top of my head, a common one that I get is sort of is this setup good for me, or is this wallet the one I should use? You know, insert service or tool here, you know, is this good? It's the thing with Bitcoin and using the tools properly that we've been speaking about, is that what Matt or I might recommend from our own personal experiences might not be perfectly applicable to your own personal threat models or skill set. So again, we have kind of covered this ground a little bit earlier, but is just try things out. You know, by all, I'm not saying don't come to people like Matt or myself and ask for advice. You know, we're always more than happy to help out. But the best thing to do is to sort of get your hands dirty and try these tools. You know, you can do it for free or for very low fees at the moment, just testing out wallets or different devices, or multi-sig setups if you want to go that far, CoinJoin implementations. Best thing to do is get your hands dirty, get amongst the communities, and you know what's perfect for one person might not be perfect for another. So it's a bit of a DYOR, do your own research, and get comfortable with what's going to work for you, really.
100%. Just to reiterate, Bitcoin Q&A has all of his guides at bitcoiner.guide. I have a list of resources and tools at citadeldispatch.com/help. At the top of citadeldispatch.com/help, I have links to both Bitcoin Q&A, myself, and our buddy Katan from Australia, who runs Ministry of Nodes, we offer private one-on-ones, and there's links to all of that at the top of citadeldispatch.com/help. So if you do feel that you have the need for a one-on-one, a specific time to jump on a call, that is available to you as well. I highly recommend both Bitcoin Q&A and Katan for that, and that's why they are at the top of that page. I think Narwhal Tacos has an interesting point. I kind of touched on it, but I felt like it was a little bit too early in the episode, so I didn't go heavy into it. He's asking, have you explained that no one actually holds their sats in a wallet, just the key? It took me a while to wrap my head around that. That is absolutely correct. You're not actually storing your Bitcoin. You're storing the key that allows you to access and spend your Bitcoin. So when we talk about all these wallets, when we talk about hardware wallets and mobile wallets, it's really either a piece of software, a piece of hardware that is storing that secret key for you and allowing you to easily access that so you can access your Bitcoin. I think that's an important point, but I would say that that's almost more of a, I don't know. I feel like it's more of an advanced thing. For all intents and purposes, you can kind of operate under the assumption that you're holding your Bitcoin in the wallet, but it is a good point. Thank you, Narwhal Tacos. I think with all that said, it doesn't seem like we have any additional questions in the live chat. I would add that obviously this is Citadel Dispatch 43. There's been 42 other episodes filled with content. That's a lot more advanced than this. So if you want to dive into that after listening to this, obviously feel free to do that. It's all available for free without ads or sponsors. Q&A, you have any additional thoughts here before we wrap up?
Just want to reiterate, just get amongst the communities, use the tools, get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid to try things out. Come to myself or Matt for any help and advice. And just one other, we've mentioned Katan. One of the prominent educator in the space is BTC Sessions. Got a fantastic YouTube page that's got video guides on using literally everything to do with Bitcoin. So if you're more of a visual learner, check out his YouTube channel. It's a fantastic resource as well.
100%. That is also linked at citadeldispatch.com/help, or you can just search BTC Sessions on YouTube. I made him a channel on bitcointv.com. I don't think he has uploaded anything there, but there's also a ton of great content at bitcointv.com that is curated. One of the issues and the pitfalls you should keep in mind when you're on YouTube, especially the high view count videos, are filled with scams and bad advice. So you need to be very careful. If you're watching a BTC Sessions video, it might recommend another video that looks like it's reputable and that a lot of people have watched and recommended it. You need to be very careful. At the end of the day, Bitcoin's about personal responsibility. So no one's going to be there. If you lose your Bitcoin, there's no getting it back. And there's a lot of money to be made giving bad advice and shilling bad product. So you really, really need to be skeptical all the time. Think for yourself, make your own decisions, and constantly keep learning. And I want to be very clear here that I'm not asking you to trust me either, or Bitcoin Q&A, or Katan, or anything else we've mentioned in this video, or any of the other Citadel Dispatch episodes. You need to constantly figure out things for yourself and make your own judgment calls. If anyone's asking you to trust them, be very, very careful, and just be very careful in general. BTC Pins wants all the newcomers to know that they could buy merch from him at btcpins.com. So there you go, BTC Pins. I love you, bro. Q&A, you got any final thoughts before we wrap it up, or are we good?
No, I think it was a great episode and one I'll be bookmarking on my homepage as well. Just want to say thanks for having me back on, and look forward to doing it again sometime.
Thank you, dude. I appreciate you. Everyone can follow Bitcoin Q&A on Twitter. It's Bitcoin Q_A. I hope to have you back on again. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you tremendously. And thank you to all the Ride or Die freaks that joined us in the live chat and joined us and continue to support the show and keep it ad-free and sponsor-free. I really do appreciate you. And cheers to you all. Thank you, Bitcoin Q&A.
Thanks, Matt.
Love you, freaks. Thanks for joining for another Citadel Dispatch. I'll be with you on Thursday for Rabbit Hole Recap. And next Tuesday for another Bitcoin Tuesday, we'll be doing Citadel Dispatch with Raw Avocado and Waxwing, jumping back into technical things. I hope you appreciate this episode. To all the new freaks, welcome. I hope you enjoy all the content going forward, and welcome to Bitcoin. To all the old freaks, I got in trouble for my Bitcoin 2021 code because I don't take a cut, so it's higher than everyone else. So if you want to join us at a Bitcoin 2022, if you want to join us at Bitcoin 2022, April 6th to 9th in Miami, it's going to be the biggest Bitcoin only event. You can use code open source for 21% off, but do not share it on Twitter. Otherwise, they're going to remove my code. So cheers to that. And I'll see you on Thursday. Love you all. Stay humble, stack sats.